Locked On's recruiting insider Brian Smith said that Billy Napier is not a top 12 recruiting coach in college football. Huh?
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. Happy Wednesday. I'm Brandon Olsen. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with New York Giants on SI. Today's episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. And like I mentioned, Brian Smith, Locked On's recruiting insider. He's also the host of Locked On Seminoles. He's also the host of Locked On The Portal podcast. And he put out his list of the top 12 recruiting coaches in college football. And I hate it. I'm gonna be honest. Look, it's nothing. And here's the thing. Also, professionally, we can disagree with people. I can have a take that people are gonna say, "Hey, that's insane." Other people are gonna have takes, and I'm gonna say that's insane. And these rankings to me are insane. And I think every fan of a school that's not on these rankings, I think a lot of them will be mad, right? Like, who's not on this list? Missouri's not on this list. And I would imagine that John Miller from Locked On Mizzou goes, hey, you know what? Missouri's beaten some big dogs in these recruiting sites, right? They've done it, or for these recruits. So you can make the argument. Sure, I think everybody's going to do it. Here's my thing. I hate these rankings because I feel like there are coaches on this list above Billy Napier, because Billy Napier is not on the list. I feel like there are coaches on this list above Billy Napier that I think are clearly not better recruiters than Billy Napier. And I've been very critical of Billy Napier throughout his entire tenure at the University of Florida. So I don't want to hear Jack Diddley about being, a fanboy or anything like that. And I think that it's very clear for some of them. I'll pull up the list for those watching. You can see the list if you're a visual learner. If you're an audio listener, I will still go through the entire list here. So in order, the top 12 recruiting head coaches, according to Brian Smith. First off is Kirby Smart from Georgia. I'm not going to dispute you on that. I don't think anybody really can. Proofs in the pudding, proofs in the results on the field, proofs in the results on the recruiting trail. Kirby Smart first, no issue with that. Number 2 is where I get my first issue with it, because Mario Cristobal is number 2 from Miami. And look, we'll talk about this later, but Mario Cristobal over Billy Napier is nothing short of clinically insane. And Mario Cristobal at number 2 is also clinically insane. Number 3 is Ryan Day from Ohio State. I have no qualms with that. Number 4 is Dan Lanning from Oregon. I have no qualms with that. We will talk about some of the circumstances later. Don't worry about that. Number 5 is James Franklin from Penn State. Again, I have no issues with that. Number 6 is Marcus Freeman from Notre Dame. I think that this is one of those times. Let's just get this one out the way. Kalen DeBoer, I'm going to remove the list for a second, but Kalen DeBoer from Alabama is not on the list. If you've seen the list, then you know what it looks like. If you haven't seen it yet, you'll hear. But halfway through the list, you got Marcus Freeman there. And I think that the reason Kalen DeBoer doesn't make a lot of these conversations is simply Alabama. I think a lot of people are going to go, hey, well, he's got the Alabama brand for him, and so he's not really doing all that work. Does Marcus Freeman not have the Notre Dame brand? Like that's what I don't get. And I'm not saying that was Brian's reasoning or Brian's logic. I'm saying that I feel like so many people, and again, most of this isn't even me to talk about Brian's opinion. It's to talk about my opinion and what I think is many of the public opinions here with some of these recruiting rankings. But I don't understand the argument that I constantly hear. Like I've said before, I haven't been in spaces for a while, but I used to spend a lot of time in Twitter spaces. I will be back in them eventually when things slow down. But Kalen DeBoer, by the way, Steve Sarkisian is not on this list, and we'll talk about that as well. But Kalen DeBoer, oftentimes when people are talking about him recruiting, they go, oh, well, he's Alabama. He's got the Alabama brand. I don't understand how Marcus Freeman doesn't get that same thing for Notre Dame. I don't get how there's not that brand that goes with it. Because a lot of guys can say, hey, I've at least been here, right? Like Ryan Day, you could say, oh, the Ohio State brand's been very strong. But it's like, yeah, Ryan Day's helped it get to where it is. James Franklin, you could say the Penn State brand is very strong. James Franklin helped it get there. So I don't think that it's fair to penalize Kalen DeBoer to the rate that we – and I'm not a big Kalen DeBoer guy. But I don't think it's fair to penalize Kalen DeBoer for having the Alabama brand and not penalize Marcus Freeman for having the Notre Dame brand. Because I would also argue that the Alabama brand isn't really even the Alabama brand anymore. What people feared was Nick Saban. That's what they feared. It wasn't that they feared Alabama. It's that they feared Nick Saban. And so I think that when Nick Saban retired and when Nick Saban left the way that he did, the timing he did, I think it actually might have hurt the Alabama brand there a little bit. And so I do think that Kalen DeBoer deserves, again, I'm not even saying he should be on the top 12. I'm just saying that there's a lot of people that downplay what he does as a recruiter. And I don't think it's necessarily fair. So I would say that. Number 7 is Hugh Freeze at Auburn, which is a joke. Number 8 is Dabo Swinney with Clemson, which I personally believe he should probably be higher here because Clemson has very openly been not as NIL laden or resource laden than some of these other schools above them. And Dabo's consistently brought in pretty good recruiting classes. Number 9 is one that I think a lot of people view as a big shock, but I think it's deserved, if I'm going to be honest. And it's Fran Brown at Syracuse. Part of the reason Fran got hired at Syracuse was because of his recruiting resume and his recruiting reputation. And so I think that it's fair to have him here. Number 10 is Lane Kiffin, which is a joke. Number 11 is Mike Elko, which like many other coaches will talk about, resources matter here, whether that's good or bad. And number 12 is Brent Venables, which again I think is just nuts. And look, when I talk about this, I'm going to talk about a lot of the things from Florida's perspective because that's what I know more. And when Brian makes a ranking like this, a lot of what he's doing isn't even necessarily about the results of their recruiting class. Like what Brian is talking about with these rankings in his defense could be just how what he hears from recruits, because he talks to a hell of a lot more recruits than I do, a hell of a lot more coaches than I do, a hell of a lot more of the recruiting analysts than I do. He does all that more than I do. So a lot of this could just be, hey, yeah, like he's doing a great job selling me. You know, I'm torn between, I'm going to pick 2 names from the list. I'm torn between Ryan Day and Fran Brown. But Ryan Day is giving me a lot more money. Like Fran's a better recruiter, but Ryan Day's got a lot more money to offer me. And so that's part of it. Ryan Day has a much better resume that he can sell me than Fran Brown. But they're really close in terms of my 1A, 1B. And so I feel like in that case, it's like, well, yeah, Fran's doing a hell of a job recruiting. He just doesn't have the same resources. And so, you know, a lot of what Brian's dealing with could be, hey, this is what people tell me. This is what people say. But I'm going based off what I know, what my opinion is. And my opinion is that some of these are bat-you-know-what crazy. Sark not being on the list is wild to me. I don't care about the resources available. He's reined in 3 straight top 6 classes. And I think that that's impressive no matter where you're at. I don't care if you're in Texas, which is one of the most productive states for a high school recruiting. I don't care. I think that you do a good job where you're at. Just because you have good resources available, or not even resources, just because you're in a state that's popular and produces talent doesn't make you a worse recruiter. Hell, we just saw Brian Kelly lose a bunch of kids from Louisiana, and LSU never loses kids from Louisiana. And we just saw it happen there. So it's not just proximity that matters. We're going to talk about why Billy deserves to be on this list over some names, including Mario Cristobal. I'm not going to let that one go. When we get back with Locked On Gators. There's nothing quite like the NBA playoffs right now. The intensity, the buzzer beaters, the fans losing their minds. I can only imagine what it must have been like, and I'm going to hate to say this, but what it must have been like to be there for game 1 of the NBA Finals when Tyrese Halliburton hits the shot, 0.3 seconds left, gives him the lead, 111-110 against OKC. I can only imagine what the atmosphere was like in that moment if you were in there. If you were a Pacers fan or a Thunder fan, I can only imagine what it would have been like, right? Pretty great. And if you want in, GameTime makes it easy and fast to get seats, even for the biggest playoff games, even for the finals, even for the biggest series that we have going on for baseball, everything. Prices on the app, by the way, actually go down closer to tip-off and closer to concert time, closer to kickoff, anything. With killer last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees, GameTime's a total game changer. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app. Create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the GameTime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day, we are available daily and free, whether it's in the podcast and on YouTube. And like I said, we're talking about these recruiting rankings. Again, I'm not someone who usually goes to bat for Billy Napier. I try to seem as unbiased as possible, and I believe that even with this opinion, it is genuinely unbiased, or as unbiased as possible, right? Because I do believe that I happen to just know more information about Florida than I know about Ole Miss, Georgia, Miami, Tennessee, Texas, all those schools. I just know more about Florida. So sure, my context is better for Florida than any other school. So maybe that makes me biased here. I'm willing to deal with that for now. Again, everybody has some kind of bias. I am trying to be as unbiased as possible here. Mario Cristobal over Billy here is nothing short of clinically insane, right? They're both in Florida. And look, I know that part of Brian's selling point with Billy is it's not hard to recruit at Florida. Sure, it's not hard to recruit at Florida. But it's also not hard to recruit at Miami. It's not. Florida, you got the bigger brand name. You got more recent successful history. And I'm not even getting into the whole argument about things. I'm just saying, it's been, 25 years since Miami's had a national championship appearance. And for Florida, it's been less than 20. So neither team has really been great lately, but they're both in that conversation. Mario won 10 games last year. Mario won 10 games, so his 2025 recruiting class should be just absolutely stellar, right? You would think if you won 10 games, then you would have an absolutely stellar recruiting class, but 13th class in the country for 2025, which isn't, I'm not saying that's bad, by the way, but 13th class in the country in 2025. In 2024, you had the 6th ranked class in the country. Great, right? 6th is awesome. That was my Steve Sarkisian one. 2023, you had 8th in the country. And then after your best year, you have the worst class you've had in 3 years. Is that not interesting? Because I was out here talking about Billy Napier's job security. Everybody was out here talking about Billy Napier's job security this past season. And yet, Florida still finished with the 7th class in the country, despite everybody thinking that Billy was going to get fired this year. And he's not a top 12 recruiting coach. He just had, let me repeat that, he just had the 7th class in the country in a year in which many people thought he'd be getting fired. And he's not a top 12 recruiting coach? Peculiar, is it not? Again, I'm not even saying he should be top 3, top 5, but top 12, absolutely. Absolutely. Had a 7th class for the 2024 class, which, by the way, also included the highest ranked quarterback and the highest ranked defensive lineman in the entire class in DJ Lagway and LJ McCray. Had 13th in 2023 after not making a bowl game. His 2022 class, 17th. Not great, right? But guess what? It's gotten better. went from 17th in 2022, went from the 17th overall class to, in 2023, the 13th overall class, so a bit of an improvement there, to 2024, the 7th overall class, and then in 2025, the ninth overall class if you include the transfers and all that, which fair, right? Which if you're including transfers, then sure. Lane Kiffin top 10, is it? I'll pull up the graphic for a second. Lane Kiffin at 10. If you're including transfers, sure, because you can't deny that he is getting talent to Oxford, Mississippi, and that's not an easy thing to do. But I am going to continue to argue Billy Napier should be on that list. And I believe that Billy Napier should be on that list over Mario Cristobal. You go look at their first couple of classes. Let's ignore the past two classes, right? So we're also not giving Billy Napier DJ Lagway. So I do think that if you ignore the past two classes, then that actually takes away from Billy Napier, right? But go look at their first couple classes and compare some things, right? Look at who's even still on the roster, because both schools, both coaches had a lot of guys in their first class especially that are gone. Both guys had a lot of that. Look at who's actually contributing from those classes. And look, there are going to be kids in which we talk about this and fans go, but he wasn't as good as we thought, right? Like there's going to be kids who, I'm not even going to bring up a Miami kid from 2022, right? I will look at Florida's class from 2022. Again, I'm trying to be as unbiased as possible. You can look at Florida's class, and the highest ranked kid in that class, Kamari Wilson. And there's going to be people, there's going to be Florida fans, and myself included, that say, hey, Kamari Wilson wasn't as good as we thought he was going to be. Kamari Wilson wasn't what he was hyped up to be. And guess what? You're absolutely right in saying that. You are. He's absolutely not what anybody thought he would be. Okay? But that's part of recruiting. Evaluating is part of recruiting. Who was Miami's highest ranked player in the 2022 class, according to 24/7? Cyrus Moss. He's at Portland State. Again, both guys had horrible whiffs. I don't care about this guy wasn't as good as they thought he'd be. Evaluating is part of recruiting. That's a big part of it. You need to evaluate these guys, figure out if they can fit, and figure out if they're big-time players for you, and go get them. Both guys have had horrible ads, right? Especially early on. But you go look at the 2024 class and who contributed for Florida compared to who contributed for any of these other schools on the list, really. Most schools on this list, you look at who contributed for Florida, who contributed to the others. You look at 2023 and who contributed, who didn't. You look at 2025 this year, at the end of this season, you go back and you look at who contributed for Florida and who contributed for these other schools. And I'm telling you, Florida is going to have a lot more production from their young players and a lot more good film from these young players. Because you could talk about production and touches and you could talk about all that. But yeah, that could just be a factor of, well, why is the running back got a lot of touches? Oh, because the guys in front of him sucked. And so he wasn't good, but he's better than them. So I'm not even saying that. I'm saying you look at the good production. You look at the good snaps, the good film, the good reps for the Florida Gators or any other recruits here, right? And you look at them and you see what they brought in, what they're bringing in, what they brought in, and the production that you're getting there. And Florida's looking a lot better than a lot of these other guys. Florida's looking a lot better than a lot of these other coaches. Billy Napier is looking a lot better than a lot of these other coaches. It's just the fact of the situation. It's not me trying to say I'm a homer. It's not me trying to say anything like that. It's just me trying to say the truth of, well, Florida's been doing a hell of a job compared to some others. Billy's been doing a hell of a job compared to some others. And again, I don't think that Billy's, a top 3 recruiter in the country. I don't think he's the most amazing coach on the planet. But we've spent a lot of time for Florida talking about the resources and talking about how there have been limitations due to the resources allowed by the administration. And how Florida is I guess we'll say historically, since the beginning of NIL, Florida's been more frugal than some other schools. Even with the resources available, they haven't been able to use the resources. And Billy's gone out there and out-recruited so many coaches on this list. I'll pull up the list again. Billy's gone out there and out-recruited so many coaches on this list. Billy's gone out there and has genuinely just done better. You look at the amount of times that Florida's brought in guys, and it's like, oh yeah, over this school, over that school. These are the schools that had visits, right? I mean, I look at number 3 and number 5 on this list, and I see someone that Florida just brought in this past weekend that had offers and visits scheduled with Ohio State and Penn State, and he's a Florida Gator already. Again, I'm not saying that Billy's the best. I'm saying Billy's better than a good number of coaches on this list. I'm saying that Billy's better than Mario. I'm not saying Billy's, number 2 because he's better than Mario. I'm saying that Mario should still be on the list in his fairness. I'm not saying he's not a top 12 recruiting coach. I just think he's a worse recruiting coach than Billy Napier. And I think that Billy should be above a good number of these guys. Right? And again, I think there are some notable omissions. We'll talk about those in a second on Locked On Gators. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day, we are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. To wrap up today's show, we're talking more about this list that Brian Smith put out. And also, look, it's been a little bit since I've just had a list in front of me and haven't really had notes written down. And I'm just like, all right, I'm just going to go talk. I don't have scripts, but I usually have, a couple notes, be like, hey, make sure you talk about this. Hey, make sure you talk about this. So it is possible that I'm missing out something on his. But I just wanted to go off the dome, and I just wanted to talk about it, where there are guys on this list, which again, I will pull up. There are guys on this list that are clearly more pocket than actual recruiting ability, right? That's the big thing that I have with people talking about Steve Sarkisian is, Steve Sarkisian shouldn't be on here because he's got the Texas brand. Steve Sarkisian shouldn't be on here because he's got that oil money in Texas. Steve Sarkisian shouldn't be on here because he's in Texas and he's got all that talent in Texas. No. Right? Like he's got Texas resources, and I'm not someone that's going to fault schools or coaches for having those resources. I do think that you could say, hey, like Fran Brown, guy who can get done more with less. You could say, sure, the fact that he does it without those resources is impressive. But I'm looking at this list and I go, Kirby's got great resources. Mario's got great resources. Ryan Day's got great resources. Dan Lanning. I think that, I don't want to say great resources, but an unlimited pocket, right? And I mean, we'll say great resources. Sure. I was thinking going to the Pacific Northwest for a lot of kids, but you got the uniforms, you got the money. It is what it is. So sure, Dan's got the resources. James Franklin has resources. Marcus Freeman has resources. Hugh Freeze, all pocket. You go back to the 2023 class, and a bunch of the guys that Auburn ended up taking were players that Florida had recruited and evaluated and done all the work for, and then Auburn just went, hey, we'll give you more money. And you guys play a similar defensive scheme than us, so you should be able to fit. Dabo should be higher. Again, I will not concede on that. Dabo should be higher than 8. I think Dabo should be top 5. Fran Brown doesn't have the resources like that. Fran Brown probably has resources that work against him NIL-wise and going to upstate New York. You're basically in Canada. No one wants to go to Syracuse. I have family that lives there, and I won't even go visit them because I'm not going to Syracuse. Lane Kiffin at 10, again, like I've said, if you're including the portal, you cannot deny the fact that Lane Kiffin is getting talent to Oxford, Mississippi, and that's not an easy thing to do. Mike Elko at 11, no thank you. Just I'm gonna say that. No thank you. I don't think that Mike Elko should be, honestly, on this list at all. You want to talk about resources? I mean, Texas A&M has him, right? Texas A&M paid the biggest buyout in college football history. And if I'm not mistaken, the margin between that Jimbo Fisher buyout and the second highest buyout in college football history is about $50 million. I don't want to hear about resources there. He's got unlimited resources. Brent Venables, I don't even know what the hell that guy's doing on this list. I don't. Oklahoma was 10th in the SEC in recruiting last year. 10th in the SEC in recruiting. In 2024, Oklahoma was 8th in the SEC. Or sorry, Oklahoma was 8th overall in 2024. But 2025, not the same, right? Not more of the same. So I don't get why that would be the case. I can't understand it especially when we don't have Billy on this list. Again, I'm not a Billy apologist. I'm not a believer. I'm not any of that. But Billy should be on this list over some of these names. Billy's a damn sure better recruiter than Hugh Freeze. Not a single shadow of a doubt in my mind. Better recruiter than Brent Venables. Lane Kiffin. Better. You could talk about the rankings. Go ahead. I'm looking at a guy that we consistently talk about as one of the best evaluators and one of the best talent spotters in the country in Billy Napier. And I said this when he got hired. I know someone that used to be on a staff with him, and we spoke about this when the hiring happened. And they were like, yeah, he puts out some of the most in-depth scouting reports I've ever seen, and he has his whole staff put out some of the most in-depth scouting reports that I've ever seen, where they're writing full sentences and paragraphs, and on so many other scouting reports, you just see like bullet points. It's not luck. It's talent. It's skill. They do a damn good job at it. And that starts from the top there. Like Ryan Day, Dan Lanning, they all have resources, right? And like I've said before, Fran Brown, he got hired largely in part due to his recruiting skill. And I think that when a big SEC job opens up sooner or later, he's going to be one of the first names called, especially if they keep finding success at Syracuse. But like looking at these also, Brian Kelly is someone that I understand people will say should be on there, but I gotta say, I just don't see it. I just don't. Again, for me, it is damning. Like Brian Kelly, LSU, 10th in the 2025 class. And I think it's damning to watch as many talented players in the state of Louisiana. How many of them didn't go to LSU? I think that's really damning. If you are an LSU fan, I think that should be scary. I do. You lost out on a lot of guys. And so that's also one of the reasons where when people talk about, this state, they're in this state, they've got the pipeline. I don't care. Texas still has to contend with Texas A&M. Texas Tech's got money. Baylor's starting to spend money. SMU is throwing bags at people. Florida, Miami, not so much Florida State. They're always going at it. There's a lot of guys that they go at each other on the recruiting trail. And usually it's a pretty good indicator of who's winning, right? Of who wins is the better recruiter there. Usually, pretty good sign. And the fact that Billy Napier is not on here is honestly just absolutely criminal. No other way to talk about it. No other way to look at it. It's just absolutely criminal that he's not there. And I do believe that another 9-win season. I'm going to say 9. I'm not giving him 8. I'm going to say 9-win season. And you're having another conversation about why Billy is all of a sudden a top 5 coach or a top 5 recruiting coach in the country. Because Florida, when they're winning games, think about it. They've done this recruiting. Again, number 9 class, was it in 25? 7th in high school. In a year where everybody was talking about, fire Billy. Again, I got to see the results on the field. I got to see the success on the field. But recruiting, really not a concern. Really not. I just don't get it. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free. We listen to the podcast and on YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow. Talk more Florida Gators for Locked On Gators. I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with New York Giants on SI, and I will see you all next time.